I'm happy to get us started, but I wanted to invite you all first.
I, I've got a follow-up question for Seth. I was really interested in what you're doing because our group, which includes Jamie, who's on the call here, and Lil, who was on a little earlier, Paula, who's here, have done quite a bit of work with, connecting scenario work and modeling and stakeholders. I'm curious how you have been or are planning to have your stakeholders interact with your modeling work? Are they helping with the parameterization of the models, at the get-go or as part of an iteration? Are they purely an audience to the output, modeling outputs to kind of vet those outputs? I'm just, thinking about the dynamics, choreography with the modeling and the stakeholder input, which is something that we've, worked through and had successes and challenges with at the same time.
Yeah, probably Charlie and I can both say something about that. This suite of models that are being integrated, the climate, food, energy, water models. These are existing models that are so the stakeholders really have no input on what those models can do, right? But what we're trying to do is identify with the stakeholders what are some of the key parameters to highlight that are outputs from those. Now, the reason that we're doing these reduced complexity models is because partly because of that issue, is then to take the results from these more complex models, right, and then be able to use them to develop these these simpler models that could focus on a set of parameters that they're interested in, but that would also allow them to manipulate what their relationships are. And we haven't really talked about them adding additional parameters. I mean, that might be something that comes up, and then we'd have to explore how to do that. So it's a lot of them. It's going to be a lot more, I think, of asking them what kinds of essentially thought experiments they'd like to run with the information that we have and that we're able to glean from this suite of models. Charlie, do you want to add to that? I think.
Yeah, I just So I'm from the biogeophysical side of things. So I'm conversant with making carbon models and water models and nitrogen models and things like this, and interfacing with climate scenarios at a variety of scales. And I look at it as an Earth system science, the whole question. I also have an engineering background, so I view the electrical energy system in an engineer's world as well. But one of the things that we are trying to do is to take these otherwise really, really complicated biogeophysical data sets, and quite literally, we can be handling terabytes after terabyte of data. And of course, you don't want to hand terabytes of data or even gigabytes of data, if maybe not even megabytes of data, to any stakeholder. You have to boil it off into terminology that they'll understand and that they also have some interest, if not management capability to change, okay? And one of the things that we thought might be productive, and we added an economist to the team, is we have a set of outputs that come from the model, very strategic outputs, like, for example, what's the carbon sequestration potential of green infrastructure in the region, right? What's the electricity production? What's the level of thermal pollution that would compromise habitat for fish, for example, in the rivers that we're looking at? What's the biofuels production? What's the corn production? What's the soybean production? And those are monetizable, I guess that might be the word. And you could put dollar values on these things. And we are thinking that some of the biophysical outputs, with appropriate simplification, can be merged to some cost estimates that we've got an economist who's working on the project, and she, a graduate student, are working that right now. And that might be a really excellent way to dialogue with the stakeholders, that, even though it's quite quantitative and even though there's a model behind it, people understand dollar values, and people understand a tripling of the cost of doing business because you didn't prepare for a climate shock of one type or another. So that's the way we've been thinking a little bit more about the actual tangible engagement to have the dialogues, of course, explain the technical aspects of what we're doing, try to simplify it to the degree it's rendering the truth and they can understand it, but also put it in terms that most people would understand. Here's the bill at the end of the dinner, right? And guess what? It's going to cost you more to go to dinner in 2050 than it is today because of the climate shocks that you might see. So that's our philosophy generally about how to do that.
And I just add too, as since I'm not the economist, right? I tend not always to think in monetary values.
I didn't mean to intimate that, Seth.
No, that's okay. I'm interested in how we use these systems dynamics models, these Stella models, because one of the things that the stakeholders can do then is they can change assumptions, right? They can change, for example, the discount rate and see how that affects the outputs. Or they could change the amount of land they want to put into some kind of, to farming versus renewable energy for siting or something like that. So they're able to look and start to explore some of the sensitivities and how the models might perform, and not use them as predictors, but as kind of an opportunity to learn about where they might want to investigate more or think more about how things interact. So that's part of the choreography, and we haven't done it yet. So we're gonna, and this is going to be really interesting too, because we had envisioned doing it in person, and now we're faced with the idea of trying to do some of this online like this, and that's going to be an interesting experiment as well.
Val, we seem to have surprised you. So would you prefer to postpone and give your talk next week?
Yes, please. I'm so sorry. It was on my calendar for next Friday and I looked at the spreadsheet and there's nothing next Friday. So it was totally my mistake.
No worries at all. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Okay, thank you. I'll be in touch by email.
Great. Wes, did you have a question? Did you have something?
I just wanted to share that what Charles and Seth were talking about reminded me of this concept from transdisciplinary research, the idea of a boundary object.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting, Charles, you're connecting, what you just pulled that example out of a hat. I'm not saying you're into monetizing everything here, but making seeing something through financial terms would be some way to create some shared meaning. I think it's interesting to think about in studying stakeholder engagement across different kinds of knowledges, what kind of boundary objects are employed and which are successful, like in which context. So that was interesting to hear you talk about that.
We in the last set of lightning talks, we wound up having a conversation about this that was a little bit different. It was about how to create value for shareholders, and obviously you can create shareholders. You can create value for stakeholders by creating economic opportunities, but that's not the only way you can create value for stakeholders. They can, so one of our presenters talked about providing networking opportunities with other stakeholders, and that's less monetized, but still something of value. Or answering, I know in my own work, producers are really interested in modeling. They just don't have a lot of access to it, and they need somebody to translate it for them. And so that's, they don't always pay for it, but that's real value as well. Virginia, I saw your hand up.
Yes, I'm really glad you added that discussion from last time, Anna, because I do think it's important to think about non-monetary values as well. You're right, Charles, that this speaks strongly to some people but I worked with EPA for many years, and in their risk assessment approach, they monetize everything. And as an ecologist, when you talk about the value of biodiversity versus human health, they're just not comparable. So they'd go through this detailed analysis and then just forget about all the ecological aspects because their equations didn't add up as much as to human health. And so it was very disconcerting. And I think with the kind of models we have now, to me, the value is that you can put everything on the table and someone can think about the value of networking and someone else can think about, the money they're going to lose or gain in future years with this and that. So I would encourage a diversity of approaches and with the diversity of audiences out there, talking to stakeholders about what is useful to them and how they can, I want to say monetize it, but put, units on it. I think I work a lot with indicators and we're really careful to think about what the units are and those units being meaningful to the diversity of audiences. So I'd be interested in hearing responses amongst everyone to that concept.
I think
Hi,
go ahead.
hi, Seth, if I might, just for a moment. Virginia, thanks for the question. This is Dave White from ASU. One of the efforts we've been engaging in with our recent work is, again, similar to the work that Charlie was describing. We're using a set of coupled models, co-produced with stakeholders. We're able to adapt the models to some extent to reflect stakeholder concerns. But one of the initiatives we've focused on is the creation of a set of about 10 multi-dimensional sustainability indices that reflect the model simulation runs. And we're able to allow the stakeholders in real time through the web interface to adapt the stakeholder or the sustainability indices to prioritize based on their perspectives and weight the different indicators within the indices. So for example, one of our sustainability indices is based around, in our water sector, is based around the balance between groundwater supplies, surface water supplies, and other indicators of overall water sustainability through the course of the simulation. And the stakeholders can say, I would like to put 40% of the emphasis in the water supply or the water sustainability indicator on groundwater sustainability. Like I prefer to value that aspect of water sustainability over other aspects. And so being able to create a set of transparent but dynamically adjustable indices, to evaluate the impacts of the assumptions in the model runs is one approach we've taken to try to get to that normative element of how to reflect stakeholder values in their evaluation of the results.
Seth, did you want to speak to that question?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I think it always depends on who the stakeholders are that we're working with, right? And trying to understand what they're interested in, what they'd like to know. And I think, Charlie gave that example from the previous project that I wasn't involved in, but that they did in where they found that the energy producers were really interested in reliability, right? I mean, and so. I guess I suppose that could be monetized, but it wasn't just a monetary parameter, a monetized parameter. And so I think those are kinds of questions that we hope will come at, or questions or insights that we hope will come out of this this kind of systems dynamics that reduce complexity modeling too, because it'll allow them. I mean, we'll put something together, and then. We'll be having a series of meetings and they'll say, well, we'd like you to add this, or this, this doesn't work the way we thought it should work. Why is it working that way? And then we'll have to go back and work with them and tweak it and do that. And so it'll be iterative. And I think, we're the people that we've included in this stakeholder working group are people who are working at a regional or sort of, as Charlie put it, a strategic or higher level kind of policy strategic thinking levels often. And so that's really different than I think, for example, what Weston is or other projects I've worked in that I'm really working with people in a specific municipality. And so they think really differently, right? They're really interested in different things. So even like the idea of networking or capacity building or learning where there's opportunities for funding and those kinds of things. Those are really different interests. So I did have a question is about for your projects, how are you sustaining the participation over time of some of these stakeholders? Because some of it sounds like you have a lot of meetings, you're working them hard in a sense, right? And that's something that I've always thought about and grappled with.
Good food helps. And we have one of our stakeholder advisory group members, Julia Oxarango-Ingram, who's on the call, and she can provide a perspective from the stakeholder side, but we really try and adapt to their needs as much as possible. And you know, for the Infuse in Magic Valley that a group of us have been, you know, fortunate to work on for over a 4-year period up until now, we were meeting every 6 months, and then more recently those were in person, but more recently virtual. But yeah, we would take folks out to the best restaurant in Twin Falls overlooking the canyon and eat and drink wine. That didn't come from the grant. The wine came off our indirect, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say I think that networking part of it was a big part of it for the Magic Valley group. But it was interesting that I think I also saw that dynamic between, and I still see it in my work. I do rural economic development work, and you know, there is this mistrust right now of academia and science and all of those things. And, you know, that can make it really difficult. And I noticed at first, some of the people that we needed to bring in as stakeholders weren't really open to, I mean, they were kind of pushing against the science and things like that. But they also gave some really good insights and kind of ground truthing about some of the assumptions. And then I think as time went on, and I maybe Jamie and Andrew and Sarah and Paula and everybody could speak to this, but I think that I saw their thought processes changing about how the science could really inform how to go forward in the future in a way that doesn't, you know, yeah, things are going to change, but you can help drive that change. You can help, it'll help you in adapting to it and not reacting after something bad is happening. And so I think that it does take time to get there. There has to be kind of a trust built. And I do think that component of being able to sit and talk over food and drink and whatever really kind of helps that. And that happened during the meetings as well, which I thought was great. So, you know, just building over time, building that trust and that willingness to go back and forth. And also I think University of Idaho was willing to then adjust you know, where they were going with the studies, you know, based on the input. And I think that was one of those trust building exercises for this group too.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say in our case, it is really important to build on long-term relationships. These specific projects tend to have a life cycle, right? So you have a funded initiative for Infuse for a 4 to 5 year life cycle, but you know, we have relationships that we've built up over 15 years that we are relying on as, you know, so we have begun to take a more systematic approach to stakeholder relationship management over the scope of our full sustainability enterprise at the university. And so I'm now using like Salesforce customer relationship management software, and just a much more, tracking the number of contacts, the who, identifying an institutional relationship manager for each of our stakeholders, so that there's a constrained point of contact that we know, that we're going to ensure. So we've been borrowing a lot from our corporate engagement office and from our foundation office for the tools and techniques that they use for relationship management, and applying that to our efforts.
Wow, that's fascinating, Dave. I hadn't thought about it through that lens before. I just wanted to add to this myriad things. Food was really important for getting the producers to come to these meetings, and also us trying to navigate that while we're focusing on a process, not an outcome. We conducted interviews with the folks that were in the room, plus several others in their community, and we brought back those interview findings in the form of an interview report. And we did a World Cafe activity with our second meeting around those. And one of the themes that came up in the interviews is, when we asked people at the end, do you think it's worthwhile for a new collaboration around these kinds of topics? And if so, what role would you see yourself playing in that? And we brought back some of those quotes anonymously to the group. And there was a real theme of folks felt like they owed something because of what they had in their place. They felt some responsibility to be part of an effort if it was there. But as soon as we went to email and Zoom, and many of our project sites have very poor, if any, broadband, poor cell phone coverage. Folks don't own cell phones because they don't work. Now we're down to, snail mail. It's really hard maintaining it.
Yeah.
I was just to reflect on some of that. Julia, you brought up how at the University of Idaho, they let you, I don't know if you can use this word, but like shift or pivot what you're actually maybe doing is, I found that to be really important. We did a project in Cape Cod with around aquaculture. And when we started, we were all talking about temperature changes of the water and sea level rise and all these things. But then there was some outbreaks of a shellfish pathogen, a Vibrio, and basically we spent a year working on that with them, and then going back to what we had originally done. And I think them feeling like we were working on the things that mattered to them, and being willing to not just push our own kind of agenda in some way was really important. We also found that food was really important, but for me, it worked in the reverse, because I had to keep bringing food, but what I really wanted them to do was to bring the oysters, and none of them ever did that. And part of the thing about this, I don't know if you found this too, is about sustaining participation, was there we really had a seasonal effect, actually in two ways. Because a lot of them went somewhere else in the winter, but in the summer, just because they're working so hard, they're just completely unavailable, and trying to squeeze in meetings and doing them around tides and all kinds of crazy things. And I imagine in some of these communities, you have that same thing. It really means us being adaptable, I think, to their schedule. So yeah, it's hard though. Not having broadband that's really tough. Yeah. Wow.
I would say the one thing, if there's a silver lining with all of this, is I think there is a real push to get broadband coverage further afield and into these more remote areas. And that really is going to bring so many more, a lot of these people will be able to attend meetings that couldn't attend them easily before. And so it is it's a little harder to get everybody engaged remotely, but on the other hand, I have found personally that I've been able to participate in more because it's available online, that there are recorded things that we can plug into later and then give our input. And so there's all kinds of adjustments about how people can participate in things. And while it's an adjustment right now, I think it is ultimately going to expand how we can reach people. So even when we can meet in person again, I hope that we keep a component of the virtual there for people as an option, because I think we'll expand our stakeholders' participation ultimately.
I think that's absolute. I know, again, in my own work, I know that even in the absence of COVID, when you're trying to get people from all around the state of Illinois together in a room, finding the right place in Illinois to do that is kind of complicated. And the, you know, apart from Zoom fatigue, Zoom allows us to get together, in fact, more often and talk about more things than if we're, you know, all driving to Springfield, which is no picnic. We are at the hour. Thank you all for a wonderful discussion. These are great. These have been great lightning talks, and they were a great set of talks today. So I think we'll let you go. But please come back next week. When is our next set of lightning?
Sure. So our third lightning talk session is next week, Wednesday, March 3 at 8 o'clock a.m. Alaska, 9 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Mountain Time, 11 a.m. Central, and 12 noon Eastern. And we have 8 talks lined up for next Wednesday morning. So that will be exciting. Looking forward to that. And thank you, Anna, for your fantastic facilitating today. Thank you, Sarah, for your logistics with keeping the recordings going. And thank you to each of our speakers. I really appreciate those recordings and presentations, and to the questions that came from the audience. Thank you so much. Take care.